please welcome up to the stage Mr. Ian Aitchison.
Morning, everybody. Different microphone. Hopefully you can still hear me. My name is Ian Aitchison. I'm the Chief Executive Officer from a company called COPC, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of our Asia Pacific business. COPC helps companies improve their customer experience. And that's kind of a bit of a broad statement. But what we do is we help companies improve their operations, which help improve the customer experience. And typically, those operations are contact centers. And the way that we do that is through a range of services, but one of them is called the COPC standard. And so this is something that you can go and read. It's a framework for running operations. Companies use it all over the world. And what I'm going to talk to you about today are some of the things that we have learned from our clients, as well as some of the things that we have taught our clients. And what we have found is that the industry is changing to begin to think not just about the role of the contact center at a single point in time, but how does the contact center fit in to the customer's experience overall. And one of the ways of looking at the customer experience overall is to think of the customer journey. So I'm going to talk to you about customer journeys. I'm not going to create a customer journey map, but I'm going to talk to you about what they are and what you should think about. And then I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about some of the, practical aspects of creating a customer journey map, which you might not think about otherwise. To start off with, what is a customer journey map? Well, actually, let's go back to have a look at where customer journey maps came from. Customer journey mapping as a concept has been around for a long, long time, 20, 30 years. But it became popularized through a book called CCiNZ, which came out in 2012. And within Outside In, there are 6 disciplines of customer experience. There's customer experience strategy, customer understanding, design, measurement, etc. Within customer understanding, this section here, one of the techniques that they suggest you follow is mapping the customer journey. So customer journey mapping, many of you will have heard about. It's not in itself an end. It's just one more technique that can help you understand how does the contact center fit in to the overall customer experience. And so the purpose of customer journey mapping is not to create a customer journey map. It is to help you improve performance. So what is a customer journey map? What is it? These are some important things that I think you should understand about a customer journey map. It is simply a visual picture of the customer's experience with an organization. It's not a process map, although there are some similarities in there. But the important thing about a customer journey map is that it should describe the experience from the customer's perspective using words that the customer would use. So it's not a process map with internal jargon about how you deliver services to your customer. It's what the customers do to interact with you to go through a journey. And the contact center might only be one part in that whole journey. The retail store might be one part. The internet might be one part. The mobile app might be one part. Using the product or the service is another part as well. And so if you begin to think about it in that way, it can get a little bit too complicated. So maybe we want to simplify the customer journey. And there's typically 2 ways of mapping it. One is a sort of horizontal journey over time. And that's a sort of classic approach to customer journey mapping. The second customer journey map is a sort of wheel. A customer journey map is more often the top one, the horizontal one, where you are looking at a specific customer journey. You're not looking at the customer life cycle overall, because that would be a very long map if you have a customer for 40 years. But if you want to map the customer's journey in getting a new service, if you're a telco, what's the customer's journey in getting the services installed in their home? If you're an insurance provider, what is their journey they have to go through from deciding to take out insurance with you to the application process to having insurance? You can cut the customer journey down into sort of bite-sized chunks rather than thinking too big. To help you cut it down into chunks, you've got to start thinking about typical customers. You obviously cannot write a customer journey map for every single customer you have. You also don't want to be so broad to suggest that every one of your customers has the same journey, the same experience. And so the next technique that you would use is thinking about what are called personas. Now personas are fictional, yet they're supposed to be believable archetypes, which represent different customers that you have. They go deeper than sort of generalized marketing segmentation. You begin to give them personalities, you begin to give them a family, you begin to talk about where they work, where they went to school, where they live, what type of car they drive, and you build up. Maybe initially, if you were starting it, you would try it out with half a dozen personas. You don't want to try and create personas for every single customer type that you have, but you want to start to think about it, because the journey that a 19-year-old has is different when interacting with your company from the journey that a 30-year-old young mother has, is different from the journey that a 55-year-old has. They are different journeys, they have different needs for your services. They are coming to your services from a different point of view. And if you're genuinely wanting to improve the customer experience, you should start to think about the experience the customer is having. You should not be looking inside out about the services you provide. You should be looking outside in, thinking about the customer. One of the other things I want to share with you about the customer experience is not only are each persona different, but each step in the journey can be different. That sounds like the most obvious thing in the world. What I mean is each step in the journey doesn't need to be equally as important to the customer. Think about this. You don't need to highly satisfy your customers in every interaction they have with your company. Now that sounds wrong, right? Of course we have to satisfy our customers, but to different degrees. For some routine transactions, like paying a bill, they don't need to be delighted with paying a bill. They just need it to go smoothly. They just need to pay a bill. They want it to not go wrong. They want the money to go to the right part of the account and the bill is paid. So think of the experience difference between getting a home loan, getting a mortgage, versus paying your monthly mortgage fee. Getting the mortgage is a highly emotional, exciting, well, normally exciting, certainly highly emotional time where you're worried about, are you going to get enough money? And then maybe it's your first home, or maybe you're buying your first family home. That's a very emotional experience. You want the bank or the home loan provider to make that a memorable experience. I don't need the same level of personalized service every month when money comes out of my internet banking to go to the home loan provider. I just need it to work. So think about, when do you need to deliver a wonderful experience versus when do you need to deliver an okay experience? And maybe contact centers fall somewhere in between. Now, this next example that I'm going to give about a company which understands that not all steps in the journey need to be equal, I think loses relevance in New Zealand, because I'm not sure if IKEA is in New Zealand yet. But for those of you who've not shopped in IKEA, when it does come to New Zealand, you will be lucky enough to experience what is known as IKEA rage. It's increased if you happen to have 3 children under the age of 10, and it's increased if your wife thinks that buying 600 little tea-light candles is a bargain. That increases the rage. That's not personal experience at all. That's just an example. So in IKEA, the way it works is it's typically massively busy, and you have to follow a path through that IKEA creates for you. You can't just go and pick the item you want. And you follow it around, and you get sidetracked into, oh, I do need to buy a new bed, or we need those lights, or we need those 600 candles. These things happen, and you cannot work your way back easily. It's a confusing, certainly to some people, a confusing mess. And lots of people complain about having to do this. And you would think, well, how have IKEA become one of the leading retailers in the world if they deliberately make their customer experience bad? Well, they know what they're doing. They don't make the customer experience bad. They make some parts of it not as perfect as other parts. To illustrate what I mean, I want you, I know it's Friday morning, but I want you to think conceptually for a while. I want you to think about what is called the this is called the Kano model. He was a Japanese management theorist, and his view was some things drive satisfaction, some things drive dissatisfaction, but they're not necessarily two ends of the same scale. Okay? They're not necessarily two ends of the same scale. And I'll translate this into contact centers as well. The first one, think, and don't think one-to-one. Think you to a whole group of customers, okay? Not one-to-one, you to a whole group of customers. Customer base as a whole. The first concept is the vertical is dissatisfied to satisfied. The horizontal is you don't do it till you do it, okay? And so the first one is if you don't do something, you can see the curve comes down. It drives dissatisfaction. If you do it, it just puts your customers to neutral. It doesn't drive satisfaction. It's just neutral. The second concept to think about, which is very hard to work out in a contact center, is if you don't do it, your customers don't care. But if you do it, it drives satisfaction. The third concept, and the more common one, is the more you do something, the more it will drive satisfaction. It's got a linear relationship. The more you do it, the more it drives satisfaction. In sort of contact center thinking, although I know I'm showing you an example from a shop, in contact center thinking, do you call it service level or grade of service? How fast you answer the phones, or both? Okay? So you know what it means. X% of calls answered within Y time period. Speed of answer, if you improve it, will not improve customer satisfaction. If it's terrible, it will drive dissatisfaction. But speeding it up, after a certain point, stops driving satisfaction. If someone phoned you and you answered in 20 seconds and didn't answer them correctly, they are not going to go off saying, oh, at least I got answered really fast. Okay? So speed of answer is a dissatisfier. Bad speed of answer dissatisfies. Fast speed of answer does not satisfy. And so, do you know what that means? This wouldn't happen. Now, I clearly don't sound Australian, but I live in Australia, and I know. Are there any Australians here? Okay, so apart from the Australians who are in the room, Australians are pretty stupid, and surely New Zealanders wouldn't make this same mistake. There are companies in Australia, and actually I work in Singapore and China and everywhere, who don't staff appropriately to meet their grade of service on a Monday. Can you believe it? Sometimes a Monday's busy and they don't meet their targets. And yet there are managers in there who say, it doesn't matter, we'll overstaff on a Friday so that we can meet our greatest service over the week? Oh, I'd say maybe half of you in the room have done that at some point. Might be monthly, might be weekly. Now, speed of answer is a dissatisfier, not a satisfier. You stuff it up on a Monday, you've got unhappy customers, if it's really bad. Answering the phone really fast on a Friday, because that's the only way you get your greatest service up. You overstaff on a Friday, so you've got lots of people sitting around waiting for a call. That's a great use of your resources. Does that make the customers who didn't get answered fast on a Monday happier? Clearly not. So we've got to, I'm kind of not even talking about my topic now. I'm just going off on a tangent. But we've got to start thinking, greatest service level, it's not how fast can we get it. It's not how can we get the monthly result. The companies that we work with think about how slowly can we answer the phone without annoying our customers. That's what you need to aim for, that bit before it tapers down into dissatisfaction. Now you might want to aim it a little bit higher so that if you miss, we all miss, it doesn't really annoy them. And then you think, and I just want to be at that sweet spot every day. I don't want to roll it up, have terrible days and good days, and it averages out. I want to just hit that band, that sweet spot every day. That is a must-be. It's a dissatisfier, okay? A delighter in the contact center is very hard. I'm not going to explain it just now. The more is better. The more you have to do to improve things, answer the question correctly. If a customer phones you, they kind of want their issue resolved. How many of you measure greatest service level? Okay, I'm going to assume everyone either measures average speed of answer or greatest service. Issue resolution. How many of you measure issue resolution? Some do, okay. Issue resolution in any measure of customer satisfaction, in any measure around the world, is more important a driver of satisfaction than speed of answer. And yet we measure speed of answer in every contact center we go to, and I would say out of the 1,000 contact centers I visited in the last 10 years, 3 of them, before we said, why don't you measure issue resolution, 3 of them measured issue resolution correctly. As in, the customer told you whether their issues were resolved or not, rather than we decided whether it was resolved or not. So issue resolution, the more you resolve customers' issues, the higher the satisfaction. That's a more is better. That's a satisfier. So IKEA have thought about this. The less you do something, the more dissatisfied. They've thought about this, and they know that some things in the customer's journey, the customer journey being at the shop, are more is betters. The more you do it, the better. Although the other way around is true for this. So price, keeping your prices, the lower your prices for products, the better it is. The wider the range of products, the better it is. However, they know that the car park, no one was ever delighted by a car park, but people can be reasonably upset by car park experience. And so they just want to make the car park experience not terrible. They want to make the self-service experience not terrible. They don't want to make it great, they just want to make it not terrible. And at the end of your IKEA journey, once you go through the checkout, and it's a reasonably bad experience as well, and the trolleys are about 16 meters long, and you try and go through. Once you get out, you can buy an ice cream or a hot dog, and they're $1 each. So even when you leave, and actually it's mainly adults buying it, but the kids have got something memorable. There's something nice when you leave. The last thing is not how bad the checkout was. The last thing from the store is these, they make a loss on it, but they don't care. Cheap ice cream, cheap hot dogs. Now, in a contact center, it's very hard to think about a cheap ice cream or a cheap hot dog, to have a delighter at the end of something. So we should probably focus on things in the customer journey that we can affect. And the customer journeys are getting more complicated for us because, I know it's in my slide here because I can see it. Do you know what the worst term, I'll have a quick look at our exhibitors, and hopefully it's not there. The worst term in the contact center industry just now is omni-channel. It's the most overused, jargony nonsense you've ever come across. Okay, that's putting that out there. We kind of know what it means, though. Customer contact centers have moved from, our customer interaction has moved from single channel into multi-channel, where there were multiple different ways for a customer to interact with you, but none of it related to each other. We're now in sort of cross-channel, where there are interaction. You might contact people using the same database, so people in the store know what's happening in the contact center, know what's happening online. Omnichannel's not a technology. Omnichannel is a concept that customers will get a seamless and consistent service no matter which channel they use, and that's bloody hard to achieve. We can provide good service, but it's very hard to achieve seamless, consistent service between each channel. So where our industry typically is some sort of cross-channel. We've got multiple channels, they do interact, but it's not a seamless and consistent service. Some of the things that have helped make the customer journeys harder in these cross-channel is the implementation of technology, like the first speaker, and I think the next speaker. Some of the technologies, mobile. For example, mobile, not as in a mobile phone, but mobile data has changed the way that we interact with our customers. Video chat probably hasn't taken off as well as the developers of video chat would have liked, although some of the banks are finding a lot of success in having it as a replacement for a more in-depth conversation where they can't have those staff in each branch. That kind of works. This week, one of my biggest clients in the world is Apple, so they're a reasonably famous company. And we help all their contact centers around the world. And I was in, they've got this thing called Apple Online Store where you can buy stuff online. But if you want to ask questions about products, so the Apple Watch, for example, you contact the contact center, but you can do it over video, and they have got it set up. There's maybe only about 20 people for still in New Zealand, but they've got these little booths on their desk. So it's normal call center desk, little white booth with an Apple Watch on like a fake hand with a camera on it, so that the salesperson, and it will work equally as well in tech support, they're just not using it there, can show someone the features of the Apple Watch, which is good, because all I can tell that it does is tell the time. But there must be more features for it. So mobile is changing the way we interact. Mobile banking, the adoption of mobile banking compared to internet banking has been like 10 times faster, partly because the delivery mechanism was already there. Self-service is also changing the customer's journey and changing the way we interact. And nothing you do can be so important that you cannot change it to self-service. Nothing you do. There is nothing, now I'm in New Zealand and you're nicer than in Australia. In Australia, border protection is important. If you come to us, we'll send you to an island somewhere out near Papua New Guinea. Yet, borders and here have turned into self-service. Immigration is self-service. We don't need to talk to anyone, although still when you fly into Auckland at 12:30 at night and you get through this in 5 minutes and you then have 40 minutes for someone to check if you've got grapes in your bag or whatever it might be. Self-service is changing the way we interact. We can buy products via self-service in kiosks and booths. This was another client of ours who worked out which products provided no margin. So they didn't want to have salespeople. So it's in a store, but it's still in a booth. You can also do it in malls as well. Self-service is changing the way we interact in restaurants, the way that we can order our food. And my favorite bit of self-service, but this is because I am a mix of Scottish and Australian, is self-service alcohol. There can be nothing better than being able to get that any time of day. So self-service is changing the way we interact. We've got to think about the customer's journey when they're using the mobile app, when they're using the internet, when they're coming into the store, when they're using self-service, or when they're contacting the call center. And when they contact the call center, they might phone you. Do you use web chat? Anyone use web chat? So there's a few companies using web chat. Messenger techniques like Facebook Messenger, which someone had a question about the bots. That, honestly, in 5 years' time, at least half the companies here, this is my prediction. I don't make predictions often, apart from I know which way the Bledders will go tomorrow, and it's not Australia's way. In 5 years' time, about half the companies here will use Facebook Messenger as a channel for interacting with companies, and of them, a quarter of them will have the interactions dealt with by some sort of bot. It is so simple, and it works so well. I have clients in China who have, obviously it's China, there's going to be bigger volumes, but they have millions, the telcos in China have millions and millions and millions of interactions dealt with each day using WeChat, which is like Facebook Messenger rather than just a web chat type thing, using, they call them robots, but chatbots. It's going to happen. It's going to happen really soon. It might not be Facebook Messenger. That's what companies are using now. Something else might overtake it here, but it's going to happen. So different channels. How do they compare? You've got to think about how they compare when you're looking at the customer's experience and the journey. And I've just thrown one thing out here. First contact resolution by channel, it's better in face-to-face channels than it is in any other channels. It's actually worse. Now, we've got a database from, I don't know, we've thousands of engagements with companies around the world. Email and voice are roughly the same. Web chat is pretty poor. Web chat adoption in the contact center industry is pretty poor. We made a mistake thinking it was like correspondence when actually it's like a phone, and so we didn't answer them fast enough and they all abandoned. We didn't train people well enough. Anyway, that's improving. That's improving over time. Right, let's actually talk about the customer journey rather than different things. A way of mapping the customer journey, the first thing you might do is create what's called the customer journey grid. And the customer journey grid looks at the different, for a contact center, like a typical environment involving contact center, store, etc. This is the simple first stage in mapping out the journey. On the vertical axis, it's the different channels. On the horizontal axis, it's what they are trying to do. And this is from a cosmetics firm in the US. And we found that in research phase, they used the web or the phone to find out where the stores were. If they wanted to purchase, they were typically purchasing on the web. And some of the issues that they were having was being able to log in. It was sort of it's very hard. It was like a club-based thing. You had to be part of the club to join. A big billion-dollar company. Then, if they wanted to use the phone, it was typically to place orders or to ask about their order. But one of the issues they had was you got points, loyalty points. You could only use your points or fix your points in the store. You couldn't fix it in the contact center. And then they were using the web or the phone for orders. And what we found was there was just so many jargon and information going wrong. And then if they wanted to complain, they were complaining in email, or this was the only time they were really using social media was to complain. They didn't have it as a channel. So we found that different things that customers wanted to do, they used different channels to do this. The biggest thing that we found from the customer journey mapping that we did with them was that customers were encountering an unusual number of barriers to actually getting anything done. Once you looked with the customer's eyes, instead of internally, you saw, yes, you've got lots of channels, but you're really bad at being able to help your customers do what they want to do. Another example of that was looking at, and this was from the same company, what worked well when you observed it, and when you're customer journey mapping, you do something called walkthroughs, where you're observing what's happening from your customer's point of view. if you bought something, you could link it to Facebook, say that you bought it. That was great. But what wasn't so good was if you bought something, the labeling on the website automatically changed to order shipped, even if it hadn't yet shipped. And not only that, once you'd received it, it wasn't linked in, so it still said order shipped, even though you'd received it. So it only had two things, blank or order shipped. And that drove a lot of contact because people wanted to ask questions about their shipment. Another issue in the customer journey, which was internally driven, now this was from a cable TV provider, a telco, part of it was cable TV, was they knew they had to get up to speed and use technology, and they knew that their competitors allowed customers to purchase services online. So they built a website which said you can buy your services online. And so you would think you'd put in the details, and I'm not great at animation, but here we go. And customer would think, great, I have now got my service. But then maybe they want to change the service, so they phone up, and the call center say, I'm sorry, we've got no record of your purchase. We don't have online purchasing. They say, but I filled it out. I filled out the website and did it. What was happening was all that really happened was it filled out a form which got sent to an office, which got printed off. The print-offs then got sent off to the other departments who then had to fix it. So there was like a 3 or 4 day lag between someone thinking they'd ordered and anyone knowing whether they'd ordered. And that drove a pretty poor customer experience. Now, if they needed to contact the call center plays an important role in the journey. So calls come in, and calls might be blocked. You don't block calls because you're too good for that. Blocked calls kills the customer experience. Just don't do it. Once they come in, they were either answered in the IVR, which is a dissatisfier, not a satisfier. IVR, there's no upside to IVR. That only ever annoys your customers. If it's a good IVR, it doesn't make them delighted. Calls might abandon the IVR. That's a expression of dissatisfaction. Some companies don't use an IVR. Some companies will even market that they get answered by real people. But all those real people do is then put into another queue to go to the right department, and it might make rate of service look better, but we now know that that's a bit of a wasted effort. So most calls drop into the queue. A call's either answered or abandoned. It's at that point that we start measuring speed of answer. That is such a tiny part of the customer journey, yet it's become such a big part of how we measure the customer experience that we've got to think more than just that little part where they might wait 20, 30, 40, I don't know, 2 minutes, 3 minutes to be answered. So use the contact center to understand about the customer journey by looking at what types of calls are there. Are we resolving their issues or not resolving their issues? And the example here, you know, most contact centers, when we go to them and ask about how do you improve the customer experience, and let's say they do QA, listen to calls, score a call. That's a whole other discussion. But they might say, right, what's your approach to improving performance? We give coaching. Okay? Every call center gives coaching. We know from looking at this that most problems are not due to the staff making mistakes. We don't recruit stupid staff. We recruit as good as we can. The problems come from behind the scenes. Parts of the customer journey are affected by our processes and our policies, our refund policy, issues like that. And so if we want to improve the customer journey, we shouldn't be thinking about making our customer service staff nicer or coaching them. We should be thinking about improving the overall processes behind. Because if we can improve those processes, we can drive more first contact resolution. Although actually, as this chart shows, first contact resolution or second contact resolution drives about the same level of satisfaction. Even 3 and 4 calls, it's still pretty high satisfaction. It only begins, as long as the customers understand why there's a gap, it only really begins to drop off when you either take 5 or more calls or you don't resolve their issue at all. So I think I just threw lots of stuff at you in the last 40 minutes. But the final thing is customer journey mapping is not an end in itself. It's a technique to help you improve the customer experience. If you don't start looking at it from the customer's point of view and you keep having an inside-out view, you'll keep getting it wrong as much as you get it right. Customer journey mapping will help everyone, your customers and you, understand the customer experience and how to improve it. And if you need more help in how to do it, you can always give me a call or send me an email. Thank you very much.